For today's DC Multiverse review, we are looking at the Ross exclusive DC Rebirth Batman figure. Before I talk about the figure, let's take a quick look at the packaging that he comes in. And of course, with most of these Ross exclusive DC Multiverse figures, they are packed in this card back packaging style. So for the front side here, this is where the figure would have been stored in when it was in the packaging. On the side, you do have his name, which is Batman, and this, of course, is the DC Rebirth version of Batman. And on the back side, it is just your standard backside for most DC Multiverse packaging. You have the comic book source material artwork, which is a very neat artwork. And up here by the corner, you do have the price tag. This is how much the figure retails for at Ross, which is $12.99. And on the bottom, you do have all the text information and barcode, which is usually found on the bottom of the box. But in this case, because it's not a box, this is why it's all on the back side. And that is pretty much it for the packaging. Very simple. And let's move on to the next subject. So when it comes to accessories that have been removed from this reissue of this Rebirth Batman, you lose out on his Batarang and his grapple launcher, which I believe were the only two accessories this figure came with originally when it was released back in 2022, I believe. I don't remember when this figure came out. It's really old. So, yeah, you just lose out on two accessories and, of course, the data profile card and the figure stand, but that's usually how it goes with these Ross exclusives, and I guess that's the way for them to basically sell it for half the price of how much these figures usually go for. But if this figure were to be released today, this would not be $19.99 anymore. This would be like $26.99, so it's even more expensive. So yeah, just wanted to bring that up as well, what accessories you lose out on if you do happen to buy this figure because you don't have this version of Batman. And with that said, let's move on to the aesthetics of this figure. Taking a closer look at the DC Rebirth Batman, I want to start with the aesthetics of his costume. So for the bat emblem here, I like the fact that it's actually sculpted because this was during a time where most of the emblems were sculpted and not just printed on like what we see today. And also it has this yellow border surrounding the bat emblem, which is a reference to that classic logo where it was a yellow circle and then you have the bat symbol in the middle. So I do like that this is pretty much like a reference to it, but in the modern sense. And for his belt, it is a very interesting looking utility belt. It's not the same as previous iterations where it's more tactical looking. To me, these are just like a belt strap, but of course, I'm sure they probably have their purposes where he can store things in them, I'm assuming. But, you know, it just looks like a strap. And then on the back side, it goes all the way to the back, so it's not just cut off, which is something they used to do where it doesn't actually wrap all the way around. And something that does bug me a little bit, but it's not like, you know, something noticeable because the cape is going to hide it. You do have all your text information right there, which is usually on the cape, but this time it's on the back of his stomach, which is really strange. But there is that. But yeah, the overall belt itself does have a nice sculpt to it, and it is actually painted in the black and yellow color, which they did not do with the repainted version of this Batman figure that was released in the 3-pack that came with Batwoman and Clayface, which I will bring in for comparison. So yeah, that's just something strange I didn't do. And then for his legs, he does have very thick thigh muscles right here, as you can see. And then going down to his knees, he does have knee guards that are in the shape of a bat, which is really nice. And then for his boots, they are sculpted with some details on them, but most of it is pretty hidden because of the black color paint. But yeah, they don't look bad. I do like the sculpt details that are present. And then for his shoes, they also have some sculpting going on down there. And then for the arms, he does have his arm gauntlets as usual because this is Batman. I don't know what these are called, but they're usually for blocking sword hits from what I understand. And they have some gadgets to them, most likely, like communications probably that he uses on one of these gauntlets where he can communicate with the other members of the Bat family, right? And then, of course, for his hands, you do have a trigger finger hand because, you know, Batman's holding a gun. No, I'm just kidding. He doesn't hold a gun. It's meant to hold a grapple launcher, but he doesn't come with a grapple launcher. But I do have that exact grapple launcher, so I can give it to this version because it did come with the other one. And then he does have a single fist hand. So there is that. And then now, let's talk about the cape detail. So this, of course, is a plastic cape. It does have some thickness to it. It's not like a soft material, but it doesn't get in the way of moving the articulation, I believe. Maybe it will hinder the arm articulation, but for some of the other articulation, I think you'll be fine. But yeah, the overall scope of it is great to look at, right? You have some of those foliage or whatever the word is. What's the term I'm thinking about? I don't even know what the word is, but you know, this stuff, right? So there is that. And then on the inside, it is purple. It's a dark purple, which is different from the other two figures I have where the purple is much brighter. So there is the color of the interior of his cape. And that's something I do want to talk about. Do you like the purple in the interior of the cape with this Rebirth Batman design? Because I don't really like the purple. I don't know why that color is even there. Because every single bat suit I've seen in the past when it comes to his cape, it's just black from the outside and the inside. So why is there purple this time with this Rebirth design? I'm not too sure. I haven't ever read the DC Rebirth version of Batman, but even then, it's just such an interesting color choice to have like purple in the inside of the cape. All right, let's move on to the head sculpt now. And for the head sculpt itself, it is a pretty good looking head sculpt. It's your standard Batman head sculpt, right? He has his mask on, and I think the overall look here is pretty close to what he looks like in that comic design that we see on the back of the packaging. Let me just bring that picture in. As you can see right here, somewhat close to that. So they didn't do a bad job capturing the likeness right there. And that is pretty much it for most of the aesthetics with this figure. It is just your standard Batman, right? There's not a whole lot of like crazy sculpt details. Most of his suit is in this like dark and light gray color, which is a standard color for the bat suit. So yeah, there you go. There is the aesthetics for Batman. And now let's move on to the articulation. When it comes to the articulation of this figure, let's start with the head sculpt. Can Batman look up? Yes, he can. This is good because if you have a grapple launcher accessory and you want to give it to this figure and have him look like he's about to use his grapple launcher, having the ability to look upward will work for that sort of pose. Looking down, he can look down to some degree, not the best, but at least it works. Turning his head left and right, he can do with no problems. Tilting his head side to side, also no issues. So overall, the articulation for his head sculpt is pretty decent. For the arm articulation, they can both lift out this much, and they can swing back and forth, but not in the best way. So for this arm, it can swing back and forth like this, which does run into the plastic cape. But for this side, because of how the cape is molded onto his shoulder, you could technically have it swing back and forth, but it's going to look really awkward. He does have a upper bicep swivel right here for both arms. He does have double jointed on both arms. And then when it comes to the hand, there is swivel and wrist articulation, as you can see. So overall, the articulation for the arms are just your standard articulation. And then for the upper torso cut, there is a rotation, but there is no ability to actually ab crunch forward or lean back, which is very unfortunate. And because of the plastic cape, there is a little bit of weight to the upper torso cut here, so it is going to have some hindrance with the mobility. And then for the waist down here, on my copy, it doesn't really rotate because it's like really stiff. And then leaning forward, it can do a little bit. Leaning back, you can see it gets pretty gappy, kinda, but it barely wants to move. and I think that is going to be a problem when it comes to action poses. Now, moving down to the legs, this is where things are kind of interesting. You would think that this waist piece would limit the legs from being able to kick out, but look at this. He can actually do a pretty decent kick, which is really surprising because some figures can't even kick up this much. So if you want to get him into a pose where he's kicking Joker, for example, you probably could do that. And then for the legs spreading outward, he can do the splits. Like, look at this. This is crazy. The range of motion with the leg articulation down here. And then when it comes to the upper thigh swivels, this is where only one leg works and the other one is really stiff. So again, in this situation, you could probably heat this up with a hairdryer to loosen it so then it can actually have some thigh swivel. And then for the articulation, there is double jointed, which works. And then down here with the shoes, you do have an articulation point, you do have swivel, and also toe articulation. So overall, the articulation for this guy is decent, but it is not the best when it comes to action poses. So if you do want to get him into some cool poses, you're going to have to get creative, and you may have to modify the torso here because of just the limitation with the ab crunch and everything. So yeah, there's just a lot of work to do, but that is pretty much the standard articulation for most DC Multiverse figures from Mcfarlane Toys. And that is going to wrap up the articulation segment, and let's move on to the comparisons. For the first comparison, here is the DC Rebirth Batman in this color scheme next to the repainted version. This was the first repainted version that they made for that 3-pack that came with the other two figures, which was Batwoman and Clayface. And as you can see, the colors are quite different. This is a darker gray color, this is a lighter gray color, and it's more of a matte finish. And this one's more glossier with the lighting. Now, when it comes to the yellows, this belt here loses the black and yellow pattern, which is really strange. I don't know why they didn't paint this belt the same way they did here. Maybe they were lazy, because there's another figure I'm going to bring in that also sports a lighter gray that is based on the Rebirth design as well. Now, when it comes to the cape, you can see that this one has a lighter purple, and then this one has a darker purple. But outside of that, it's the same exact figure, just with a different coat of colors on it. So there is the first comparison here. And for the next figure, here is the Greg Capullo Batman from Dark Knight's Metal, which also retains the DC Rebirth, suit design. And as you can see, it has a lighter gray, and the belt is, colored in the yellow and black color patterns as we see here. Now, it is a little bit different, of course, with the middle section having this black color. This one doesn't. But I'm assuming the suit designs are pretty much similar, right? Just a different artist drawing this DC Rebirth Batman. And his knee guards, yes, they do have the bat sort of style to them, right? So, yes, it is the Rebirth costume. And as you can see, the purple there is also a lighter purple with this version compared to this with the darker purple. So there is the comparison with this Batman figure. And for the last comparison here, he is next to his wave mate, being part of wave 3 of these Ross exclusives. It is, of course, the Joker with the messed up face that we looked at on Monday. So that is going to wrap up the comparisons for today's review. And if you found today's review informative, do give this video a like. If you want to subscribe to the channel for more action figure content and whatever else I do on here, it would be much appreciated. And with that said, take care, and I will see you in the next video.